It seems like there's a lot in the Talmud: racial supremacy, the mistreatment of women and children, prepubescent children down to age 3.
There's so much like really scandalous stuff. It's never been really popular to say that Jesus is boiling in excrement.
The people that are gaslighting us into thinking that there's absolutely nothing objectionable or wrong about this book.
Oh, that's all taken out of context. It's all anti-Semites. And I bought into that for a while.
The context does not help. If anything, it makes it worse. There's never once a voice of reason that says, hey, maybe all of this is terrible. Maybe why are we even having this conversation? So much of Christianity makes more sense the more that you look into the Talmud and you realize how corrupted this navel-gazing bullshit is. I don't know. You seem like a Fed to me. That's
exactly what a Fed would say.
Great googly mooglies. Folks, do I have a treat for you today? The answer is yes. That was a rhetorical question. In this video, I interview Mitch of the YouTube channel Interesting Books Reviewed, where he reviews interesting books, oddly enough. Very strange title. And one book in particular that I have found very interesting of late is the Babylonian Talmud. And I figured, who better to pick the brain of than a massive book nerd and fellow black cat enthusiast? Now, this video is going to be a fairly broad overview of the Babylonian Talmud, obviously because it is a massive tome of work. But we are going to dig into some of the more controversial, spicy passages, so stay tuned for that. And before anyone accuses us of taking any of this stuff out of context, I'm including a link to an online version of the Babylonian Talmud in the description of this video, and I encourage you to follow along with us. I promise you, adding more context to these passages does not make them any better. It just makes them more horrifying. Now, folks, one last thing before we get into it. Mitch's YouTube channel has had several community guideline strikes and warnings over the last few months, essentially just for committing thought crimes and talking about books that certain people, apparently, really don't want you reading. So unfortunately, we both think that it's just a matter of time before his channel gets completely nuked. He has set up a backup account on Odyssey.com. There's a link in the description. If you wouldn't mind doing me a big personal favor, please go follow him, show him some support. He already has 1,000 subscribers, but as we all know, he was promised 3,000 subscribers. So we need to make that happen, right? Any hoodles, gang, let's get into it. So here's what I appreciate about your videos. I think that you are very cognizant when you're about to tread into a minefield and you lead into it with some kind of a disclaimer. So what I thought I would do is I will lead into this with a disclaimer, and then you can either agree with it or disagree with it or add or subtract or anything like that. Fair enough?
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I explicitly disavow racism. And what I understand to be racism is the belief that any race is superior or inferior to any other race, and that people should be treated differently based on their race.
Amen.
Okay. So good. So far, so good. Okay. And I would extend that to any immutable characteristic. I think that there's a very clean distinction between an immutable characteristic like race or sex or anything that you're born with versus a mutable characteristics like culture or ideology or behavior, things that you can choose and change. And while I think that it's not appropriate to discriminate based on immutable characteristics, it is a moral imperative to discriminate based on mutable characteristics. Is that
no argument from me?
Cool. All right. Which means that if hypothetically I were to find a book that advocated for things like racism or genocide or slavery or child abuse or child exploitation or anything like that, I would probably be inclined to disavow a book like that, hypothetically speaking. If I were to find a book like that, I would probably take issue with it, and I would probably want to poke holes in it and say, this ideology is problematic, let's just say. Regardless of the people who subscribe to that ideology, and regardless of the racial or ethnic background of any people who do, I would still take issue with the ideology itself. Fair enough?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's, okay. Yeah. In that same vein, I would say also, when I find a book that does have like there's several books I've covered on my channel that I disagree with every fiber of my being. But I would never promote the censorship or destruction of those books on those grounds. In fact, just the opposite. I am like the Might is Right book that review that got pulled down. I think that book is garbage, but I think people should read it because that needs to be juxtaposed with all the good information, because then you see it for what it is. But to me, that's how we grow, is through exploring the literature, exploring the stuff that we don't like, and weighing that out and seeing if it's worthy or not. And again, I don't think destruction only makes it, it suddenly becomes forbidden fruit that everybody wants. So
it's a Streisand effect.
It is indeed.
So well established and well studied, and I'm with you. Like I think that the more that you try to suppress something, the more it appeals to people, the more that it vindicates the people who already subscribe to it and say, we're being oppressed. It's like, well, no, I think that bad ideas should be drawn out into the open, and that the sign of wisdom, or a sign of wisdom, is the ability to hold in your head an idea that you disagree with and either play devil's advocate with it or steel man it or whatever. But to be able to pick ideas apart, even if you don't endorse them, even if you don't subscribe to them, that you should be able to play around with them in an open way. Yes.
And in that same vein, I would say, if you hold ideas that you feel like that you need to hide from people and disguise them as something they're not, that should be a red flag for you that your ideology or your theology or whatever it is, if you're having to hide that, if you have to protect that with lies and obscuring the nature of your actual belief system, you might be wrong. So that's a good, if you cannot just be open with your theological or philosophical position for fear of consequences, you might want to re-examine that position.
You touched on it a little bit, but I think that what I'm fascinated with when it comes to the Talmud, obviously I'm very interested in the history of it. I'm very interested in the structure of it. And it's a very interesting history. But the thing that I find to be more, how do we say, interesting, the actual urgency that I feel surrounding the Talmud is the practical impact that it's having on the world today.
Yes.
In that I'm, and I was kind of like trying to thought experiment my way through, like, why is this so strange to me? And the I guess analogy that I came up with was, imagine if I had a time machine and I went back to the 15th century, the Spanish Inquisition, and I saw all of the torturing and the burning at the stake and all the thousands of people that were being harmed in the name of Christianity. And I were to walk up to one of those people that were doing the beatings and the torture and the burning and the whatnot, and I were to say, hey, you're misinterpreting the scriptures. You're taking these things out of context and you're using them to harm other people. If they were to respond to me and say, oh, we're not doing this because of the Bible. What are you, a racist? That's horrible. That's kind of how I feel about the Talmud, is that I see and I hear and I watch people referencing the Talmud, referencing rabbinic law as vindication for real world harm that is being done to real people. And when I notice that, when I pay attention to that, when I point it out, that is somehow more problematic than the harm that is being done explicitly. Like, there's no confusing it when you hear, I don't know, I've lost track of how many different members of the Israeli government and the Israeli religious community that have made explicit reference to Amalek as vindication for what is happening in Gaza right now. And I think gaslighting is such an overused word, but it feels that way to me. Does that resonate?
Oh, definitely. And it's the classic, what do they call it? Darvo, the divert, or the whole reverse victim and offender. I forget the exact acronym, how that all works, but it's that whole tactic of
deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Yeah,
that's it.
I had to look it up. I didn't know that. I had to look it up.
Yeah, but that's the classic MO. And the sad thing is, if you've dealt with this is transcends ethnic and religious boundaries. But if you've ever dealt with someone who is a psychopath, and we all have, whether or not you know that you were dealing with a psychopath, you've dealt with psychopaths. And that is one of the first things you'll notice is you will feel guilty for calling them out on their behavior. Like if you raise your voice, like if you realize, oh crap, you were doing X, Y, and Z to me behind my back and I just caught you doing this, the fact that you raise your voice will be interpreted as an attack. So why are you attacking me? Whoa, easy now, buddy. And you're like, no, I'm upset because you were like literally attacking me. Like I caught you poisoning my food. And they're like, oh, whoa, hey, easy with the hate, and that tactic right there. I think we're finally hitting a point as a world, on the world stage, shall we say, of people getting fed up with that and realizing, no, that doesn't work anymore. There's a point where, like, as you're chopping up a human being with an axe, I yell at you to stop. You're like, whoa, why are you yelling? You're like, no, you're chopping someone up with an axe and everyone can see it. So,
right.
So yeah, but the sad thing is that if that approach is so effective, and again, it goes, there's certain people that figure those things out, that again, this is a mental thing that transcends, theological and philosophical boundaries, where people behave that way. And if you've encountered it, that you'll wind up finding yourself trying to defend why you were upset at what they did, rather than focusing on the fact that they did the thing.
Right. And I think that my kind of core issue is that obviously I think that with basically any book or ideology or literature that claims divine authority and allows for psychopathic behavior is going to be exploited by psychopaths at some point. And the Bible has been used in that way. The Quran has been used in that way. I don't see the Talmud being any exception to that rule. And so for me, it's less that the Talmud is uniquely bad, although maybe it is uniquely bad. I'm still kind of going through it in my own very limited way, not being fluent in Aramaic or Hebrew. But even if it is uniquely bad, I'm more interested in removing the taboo around pointing out the ways in which it is used.
Yes.
Than I am in, as you said at the beginning, I don't want to destroy the Talmud. I don't want to remove this piece of human history. I would rather that we learn from it and move beyond it, and maybe find a path towards modernizing Judaism in the same way that Christianity and many practitioners of Islam have modernized to, let's just say, Western Enlightenment principles.
Well, and I think there's also in fact, I have a passage right here that's from one of the first, the introduction of the Socino Talmud, and it talks specifically about how a lot of Jews, and it points out that they're in the minority, but there's a lot of Jews that have a big problem with the Talmud because of exactly, a lot of the material therein, that they have big issues and have divorced themselves from Talmudic teachings. But they quickly say, no, but that's a minority. That's a minority. But so there are groups within Judaism that see that as problematic and say as much.
What I find about Christianity is, especially if you take the Bible as a whole, is that there seems to be a clear progression in terms of its morality. Like the closer you get to the Gospels, a lot of people don't appreciate how small percentage-wise the New Testament makes up, and the Gospels are just like a fragment of this massive tome of work. Have you ever heard of the book Answer to Job
I'm not.
Carl Jung. Have you read any Carl Jung?
It's been a long time. I did in college, but what's it called again?
Answer to Job. And he wasn't he appreciated the Bible for archetype theory, but his idea was that Job in particular represented a turning point in the, I guess, consciousness of God in the Bible, or like our understanding of God, because God seems to go through this moral development as a result of his interaction with Job, where Job stands and he's just, why has this happened to me? And God seems to, during that monologue that he gives, to go through this interesting kind of self-reflective moment where he's maybe realizing, oh, maybe I shouldn't mess with people in this way, or whatever. That's just Jung's interpretation of it. But clearly there is a difference in the Old Testament to the New Testament. And this is to tie it back into the Talmud. A lot of what we hear about the Talmud is that when we take things out of the Talmud and take issue with them, we're taking them out of context. Well, the same could be said for the Bible. If you take any piece of the Old Testament out and look at it in isolation without considering the Gospels, like I consider the Gospels to be not only the fulfillment of the Old Testament, but also kind of a progression and a correction to maybe misunderstandings of God in the Old Testament. And we have that. We can point to the New Testament and we can say, well, no, this is a better understanding of how God wants us to interact with him and each other and, the greatest commandment and all of that. So we have that in the Bible. We can look at the Gospels and say, well, this is the thing that you're taking. You're not including the context of the Gospels. With the Talmud, it seems like there's a lot in the Talmud, especially in regards to racial supremacy or advocacy for, let's just say, the mistreatment of women and children, just to put it very gently, that doesn't seem to have any meaningful rebuke or correction. Is that how does that vibe with you?
No, that's yeah, you're being very polite.
I'm trying to be very polite. Don't feel like you have to be polite. I'm just
well, and it's kind of funny. It's one of some of the passages in the Talmud are such that you really want to like turn the page and like get to the end and it's like, psych,
right.
We had you going, didn't we? But no, there's not. And yeah, that's typically what you hear is that it's taken out of context, or you're not a rabbinic scholar, so you're not going to get it. You don't, a rabbinic scholar is only someone who dedicates their life to the study of the Torah and the Talmud and all is going to get this. But just for the people that don't know, just the basic layout of the Talmud is it's basically a giant. It's almost like court filings of. And that is kind of polite terminology too, because it's not really a back and forth about some of this. It's the Mishnah, which is the rule, and even that's a little squirrely sometimes. But the Mishnah is the rule, like don't cheat on your wife, and then the Gemara is the like discussion about all the finer details about that. And sometimes it'll have like, well, Rabbi so and so said this about this or whatever, but. There's so much of that when you start digging into it, actually reading some of it, you go, oh, there's so many other things in our culture that start to make sense. Like the whole legal culture, the way a lot of court cases are won with these word games. And when you see the way the Talmud is structured, you're like, oh, good night. Like if you say, for example, what I said there, don't cheat on your wife. If somebody tells that to me and I say, well, now wait a second. What do you mean by cheat on my wife? Mm-hmm. You'd immediately be like,
what do you mean by wife? What does that mean?
Yeah. You'd immediately like, okay, we need to check your text messages and check your call records because something's going on. Like you don't need clarification on that. If I say, hey, take it easy on the Sabbath, Don't do anything. You need a day of rest. Every 7 days, it's a good idea to take a day of rest. Okay. Can I carry a water bottle? Things like that. You're like, it was self-evident. What I said was just take it easy on the Sabbath. Like, okay, well then if somebody doesn't take it easy on the Sabbath, we're going to kill them. No, that's not, but that's all those word games that get built onto that. And that's the insane part, because there's so much commandments and so many things in life that are self-evident to the rank and file general public people. If I say don't steal, unless you're 2 years old and you don't understand what that word even means, what I'm saying when I say don't steal, and you don't immediately fish for a loophole on that and say, well, but what if you got up to leave and your wallet fell out of your pocket and I picked it up? I didn't steal it. It fell out of your pocket and I grabbed it. So I didn't steal your wallet. And
what if I don't turn on my air conditioner on Saturday, but I set a timer that will turn it on for me on Friday? Right. Am I good then? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that's like you're totally ignoring, and like what you said about malicious compliance, it's like you're totally ignoring the spirit of the law. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'd recommend, for those of you, Christian or otherwise, I highly recommend when you start digging into the Talmud, go back to all of the sermons and the parables of Christ. And so much of that makes so much more sense once you understand the Talmud. Mm-hmm. Because one of the first things I have here, do you mind if I jump in?
Please, okay. Go nuts.
Woo-hoo! All right, let's do it.
Just to clarify, because we didn't really talk about it, but so the structure of it is the Mishnah is the original law. It's kind of
it's kind of, but it's the original. It's kind of law plus. So, take Leviticus and then add some crack cocaine, because it's like Leviticus on crack. So
the idea though is that, like, when Moses came down with the 10 Commandments, he also carried with him an oral tradition or an oral law that was then written down several hundred years later.
Well, yeah. Okay. So what they call this the wisdom of the elders. And they say that the elders of the tribe, when Moses came down with the 10 Commandments, that they gave it meaning. So they took this and extrapolated all of this out of it. It's like they took a compressed file and uncompressed. It was a zip file that Moses came down with, a zip file, and it was uncompressed and set in motion. But they believe this is the wisdom of the elders. And this is where I think it's really important to go back. And this is where I have to be very careful how I word things here, because I do believe the Bible is inspired text. And I think because of that, it's real important to also note that Jesus was very critical of oral teaching and the oral tradition. And just about everything he said was in response to that, about how stupid it was and how evil it was. And talks about how you're teaching the commandments of men and you're teaching those as though they are of God. Mm-hmm. And I think when you hear that from the mouth of Christ, you have to go back to the Old Testament and go, okay, so how do we look at that now? Because here we have the Son of God telling us that a lot of this is the teachings of men repackaged. Mm. And a good example of that is when Jesus heals the lame man on the Sabbath, and they're like, and they're upset with him. And they're like, we got you. You're healing a guy on the Sabbath. And he's like, if one of you, and one of the examples he gives is out of the oral tradition, if you had a cow fall into a hole, wouldn't you get him out? Of course you would on the Sabbath. So, that's what I'm doing. I'm helping out one of my children. And he says, like, you guys don't get it. The Sabbath is a gift to you. The Sabbath was never meant as a blunt instrument. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't really come into focus unless you read, this is technically the first part of the Talmud, and it has the whole thing is all about the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And about the Eruvs and all that kind of stuff. But you think there's almost pretty much all this book is dedicated to the legalese involved in the Sabbath. And Jesus puts all that to rest right there with just a couple of sentences of saying, you totally missed the point. I gave this to you as a way to take care of yourself, to chill out for a day. This is never meant as a blunt instrument to beat people over the head. So, or to punish people for carrying a water bottle or what have you. So that's, I think that's a really important thing to remember in that. That's a good way to understand the Talmud a lot better and to understand the teachings of Christ a lot better, that you realize that he was railing against the oral tradition, which that was considered, this was almost like the Freemasonry of the time. This was considered so explosive that it wasn't written down, because they knew this was, some of this stuff is pretty messed up stuff. So nobody wanted to write it down. And it finally hit a point where it had, they kept adding on to it. I mean, it was more and more and more and more stuff, because even after Jesus is crucified, there's obviously more stuff because Jesus is mentioned in there. So they keep adding on to this. And eventually, I think it was around 500 AD, where finally they're like, okay, we gotta write this down. And that was when in Babylon, they wrote the Babylonian Talmud I think it was around 500 AD when that started. They started actually writing that down. And then you have the Palestinian Talmud, or the Jerusalem Talmud, which was compiled in Jerusalem. And it is, oddly enough, it is referred to as the Palestinian Talmud. And the Palestinian Talmud was considered the more friendly Talmud, that wasn't seen as, that was one that was a little bit safer for non-Jewish folks to read, whereas the Babylonian Talmud was seen as much more definitive, but also much more slanderous, especially some of the stuff about Jesus. So, but anyway, back to what I was saying about the.
I totally derailed you there.
It's all good. The Kol Nidre is, and I'm trying to remember now how we even got onto that, but the Kol Nidre is a great example of that kind of thinking. Of here's the Mishnah is, and Jacob said, also he who wishes to subject his friend to a vow to eat with him should declare, every vow which I may make in the future shall be null. His vows are then invalid, providing that he remembers that this at the time of the vow. And then it goes on to explain it. If that's not enough, then it goes on to explain it. And basically saying that if a guy is being forced to take a vow, like he's basically, a guy's offering him lunch in exchange for him taking a vow or something to that effect, that he's taking this vow under duress, and he doesn't have to honor his commitment or honor this vow. And the Kol Nidre is the prayer by which you absolve yourself of the vows that you're going to take in God's name for the following year. So if you're preempting any agreements that you're going to make in the name of God or anything else, that you're preempting that on Yom Kippur by praying the Kol Nidre prayer. And anyway, it goes on to explain that as long as you say this up front in advance before you take the vow, then you're safe. So it's like little kids running around going, my fingers were crossed, I didn't really mean it.
Well, this is a thing that's done. How frequently is this?
Annually.
Annually. Yeah.
So
it's just a way of saying, like, for the next year, any promises I make are null and void, and I won't be held to them.
Yes, every vow which I may make in the future shall be null. His vows are then invalid, providing that he remembers this at the time of the vow. But if he remembers, he has canceled the declaration and confirmed the vow. So as this other guy answers, so this is a discussion about it. So another guy is saying, so, if he remembers, he has canceled. It says, providing that it is not remembered at the time of the vow. So if he forgets at the time of the vow, then the vow, he has to honor the vow. But if he remembers that he did the Kol Nidre at the time that he's making the vow, then safe. So in that, therein is I mean, that is the whole problem of the Talmud, of this idea of motive, that I can hide motive from God. And this is something I know, we talked about on the phone the other day, of the fundamental problem with this. And I think this is, again, where the teachings of Jesus start making a whole lot more sense, of the idea when Jesus is explaining to him that if you even think about committing adultery, you've committed adultery. And I've had people try to tell me, oh, well, that's this showing just how draconian Christianity is. And that's not the point of that at all. He was trying to explain that I know your thoughts, like you're not, your motive is not secret. So if you're sitting around thinking of this stuff, you're still part of, you've still got one foot in that thought. If you're fantasizing about sleeping with your neighbor's wife, that's still bad.
Well, it's about the heart condition.
Yes.
It's about your intent, and it's about you, because we can, so much of Christ's teachings were about not doing good deeds out of a place of wickedness, like not giving money
to be
out
seen.
of charity, to be seen, not praying in the middle of the street as loud as you can, but going into the quietest, most private part of your house to be with God. Like, so much of it was about your heart condition and your intent, and that if your intent was bad, then nothing that you did meant you have your reward. You have your reward already. Good for you. You get accolades in the eyes of men, and that's all you get. That's it.
Well, and that, and really all of this stuff, the more of the Talmud that you read, the more you start you start getting this picture of God as magic robot rather than God as a creator father figure. You get this magic robot that I did this thing, I jumped on one foot and I said the thing. Now you have to do this because you're magic robot. And yeah, and that's exactly, like, again, you look at all the parables of Jesus saying where he's all that is turning that on its head, saying, no, I know what you're thinking. You can't just say, like in John the Baptist, when the Pharisees are going out to see what John the Baptist is doing, and he stops them in their tracks and says, don't say for a second that you are children of Abraham, because God can raise up children from Abraham from these rocks. Like, that means absolutely nothing. Like, you guys need to prepare for repentance because you're about to get wiped out. So that
just real quick before you move on, the idea of God as robot, like I wanted to just double click on that just a little bit, because after you told me that, I went and looked up. So there are 5 or 6 different stories that I have written down here that I'm going to look more into, of Jewish scholars or rabbis or wise men or prophets or whoever outsmarting God.
Yes.
And like, through some legalistic tomfoolery, loophole seeking, they get God to concede to them and either change his mind or they manipulate God and outsmart God. And there are multiple times. What is this? The oven of, I'm going to mispronounce this. The oven of Aknai, where and at the end of this exchange, they manipulate God into doing a thing, and God says, you got me. You defeated me. You darn kids. You're so much smarter than me. The hubris. The back to like the heart condition and the attitude. The impression that I get from these stories is just this arrogance to view the creator of the universe as not only equal to you, but you could know more than God. Basically, you could know God's law better than God.
Yes,
and that seems to be kind of the objective with with at least some of this.
Oh yeah. Like the Kol Nidre is, again, with when Jesus is saying, don't swear by the altar, don't swear about the gold in the temple, don't swear by the temple or whatever. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. And when you read all the stuff about the Kol Nidre and the way that, what that stems from, you're like, yeah, of course. If you don't want to make a vow, don't make a vow. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. Don't do it. But that's the crazy like contract lawyer with God. Like, hey, God, you said this, so now you have to do this thing. And there's so much of modern day, the modern day political entity of Israel is based on that, of like the very existence of the state is based on this idea of us like treating the Bible like a real estate deal. Like, well, we have to have this thing. And there's a funny quote that you'll hear a lot that I don't know who originally said this, but, talking about a lot of the atheist Jewish crowd that says, they don't believe that God exists, but they do believe that he gave them Palestine. So,
was it Bill Maher? Didn't Bill Maher, the famous atheist who said that, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's in the Bible or whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. And it's like, wait, what? So yeah, and now I will say, I'm not going to get into, for the sake of, there's so much like really scandalous stuff in dealing with children, and I'll see if I can touch on some of that without, touching any third rails. But one of the things I want to say for those that are curious about Jesus in the Talmud. So again, the Talmud was written down, a few hundred years after the death, burial, resurrection of Christ. So he is mentioned in there, but they use some code talk. This is a whole section about Jesus, but they don't use the word. They're very careful about not calling it, because they think even saying the name Jesus. I don't know if you've seen the whole deal about cross. They don't use a plus sign.
Plus signs, in their math.
They'll take the bottom off the plus sign, which kind of funny, because when I saw that, because I hadn't known about that. I had never heard about that until just a few years ago. And then I saw Bill O'Reilly has his Killing Jesus book. Mm-hmm. And that's how he depicts the cross, is missing one of the,
come on.
Now
I gotta look this up.
Now he's doing, I think his is missing the top part when they draw the plus sign, they take off the bottom part. Yeah.
Oh my.
And I was like,
I'm going to put a picture of this up for like in the interview. This is amazing.
But
wow.
when I first saw the way he drew the cross on that, I was like, why is he drawing the cross like that? And then after that whole thing about the plus sign came out, I was like, oh, I get it. So anyway, the passages about, and this is in Sanhedrin, down here in the footnotes, it says the two passages that follow have been expunged in all censored editions as to the historical value to be attached to them, and then talks about Jesus, that it's Jesus, the Nazarene. So there's Jesus is mentioned at length in this particular volume, the Sanhedrin volume, and but it's all this code talk, because remember, at the time they were writing this, that was really taboo. This is when it's never been really popular to say that Jesus is boiling in excrement in hell. I mean, that's never one of those things that people are going to be really thrilled about hearing, but they were especially touchy about that. And if you doubt the veracity of that, and I don't mean you, I mean just any of the audience listening to this, I would highly recommend, since I am Interesting Books Reviewed, and this is Jesus in the Talmud by Peter Schaefer. I think that's right. I think it's Peter Schaefer. Yeah, Peter Schaefer. And I don't know how hard this one is to get, but this is basically validating that, yes, in fact, that is all the rambling stuff in Sanhedrin here is specifically about Jesus of Nazareth. And it has a whole section in here that I have dog-eared, where it's specifically talking about how at kind of the end of his screed here, that that this was kind of a daring thing to say this about Jesus, that the Babylonian Jews in the Sasanian Empire, living in a non-Christian and even progressively anti-Christian environment, could easily take up and continue the discourse of their brethren in Asia Minor. And it seems as if they were no less timid in their response to the New Testament's message, and in particular to the anti-Jewish bias that is so prominent in the Gospel of John. They fought back with the means of parody, inversion, deliberate distortion, and not least with the proud proclamation that what their fellow Jews did to this Jesus was right, that he deserved to be executed because of his blasphemy, that he will sit in hell forever, and that those that follow his example up until today will not, as he promised, gain eternal life, but will share his horrible fate. This is an excellent book to just get it, again, straight from the horse's mouth about what exactly is in there. So it's always funny to me when I hear scholars online will do these Talmud scholars will say, or rabbis will do these videos saying, oh, that's all taken out of context. That's all anti-Semites. And I bought into that for a while. When I first heard some of this stuff, before I really understood the Talmud and the Schofield Study Bible and all of that, I would hear that, and yeah, it's anti-Semites taking stuff out of context. Because like you said, we hear that all the time with the Bible, where people will take one verse out of
Sure.
context, and you're like, okay, yeah, but did you read before that and after that? That is the kind of troubling thing of the Talmud, is it's not. There's no point at which, again, you don't read a few passages later. It's like, psych, I was just saying that just to mess with you. It's very much that's the opinion. So,
well, and that's just really quickly I wanted to, because I've the last week I've exposed myself to a very unfortunate amount of the Talmud. There are online versions that are apparently relatively accurate. Just one example. If folks at home, I'll put it up on the screen, or I'll put the address to it up on the screen. But it's Yevamot 61a to 61b, and this is like two entire, I don't know what this would be, chapters or these passages, which are very often cited. They have to do with whether it's appropriate for a high priest to marry or an undeveloped girl.
Yeah.
We'll just, I'm going to just dance around that as much as I can. And
incredibly young,
remarkably undeveloped.
Yes.
Girl, whether or not that's acceptable, and what are basically regulating this, not saying, hey, this you should never do this. Right. It is. And what I had always heard up until very recently was these are taken out of context. Well, okay, I go in and I back up a full, 3 or 4 pages, and I read through and another 3 or 4 pages through, and the context does not help. If anything, it makes it worse, because these chapters, these 2 or 3 chapters, or whatever the term is, in particular, it's just guys going back and forth as if they were the regulatory body for a nonprofit, like trying to hammer out the details of a deal or something like that. There's never once a voice of reason that says, hey, maybe all of this is terrible. Maybe why are we even having this conversation? Why is this a thing that we're considering? What are we doing here? There's none of that. It just keeps going, and the more you read, it's gut wrenching.
Well, what about a woman and her son?
Right.
I don't know if you've read that part. It's
on my list.
No. But I was the same way, because I was like, okay, I'm going to read another paragraph, and then it's going to be like, oh no, see, that's like, as said by so and so, but we know he was also
that guy was an asshole. We don't listen to him at all.
He was smoking black tar heroin when he wrote everything you just read in the last 20 pages. But no, there's never nothing like that. But yeah, so and here's my thing too with all this is, again, it's like, I will happily defend the words of Christ. If somebody says, hey, Jesus said X, Y, and Z, I would say, yeah, let's look at that. And I'll lead with that. I'm like, that's the gold standard. That's where I'm trying to be. So to me, if you believe this, if this is your guiding principle, if you believe in the material in the Babylonian Talmud, then lead with it. Like, explain it to us. Like, I would love for Dennis Prager to give me an eloquent explanation for some of these passages, or somebody like Ben Shapiro to break this down and explain it, not hide it, not try to say that it doesn't exist, or gaslight us and tell me I'm not reading what I'm actually reading, but actually explain. It's like, if you believe this, then make a compelling case for it. I mean, that's, again, in the marketplace of ideas, as we hear, it should be able to stand on its own. And that's, to me, that is the real tell in just the vile aspect of all of this, is if you're having to hide it, if you have to pretend that this isn't in here. And I was using this analogy the other day about some of the debunking books that debunk certain topics like SRA, or, some of the preschool scandals that happened in the 80s, or the pasta fence fiasco. Without you want to be careful about using the actual word if you don't know that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that word,
I think my audience will pick up on
okay.
that. Yeah, I got you.
But the debunking books, some of those are incredibly valuable because they show you when someone knows the things to avoid. That tells you a lot more than someone. You can tell the difference between someone who is just ignorant of this kind of material and it's just like, oh, no, you misheard that, or that's not in there, and they've just never read it, so they don't know. You can tell the difference between that person and someone who has read it and they do understand it. So it's kind of like watching someone walk through a minefield while telling you they're not in a minefield, but they know where to step. And you watch their steps and they're very careful. I have to take like 5 steps this way and then 3 steps this way and 5 steps another way. It's like you realize, oh yeah, you're in a minefield and you're aware of the fact that you're in a minefield. And it doesn't matter that you're poking a stick in the ground occasionally and going, see, no mines, because it's obvious that you're very carefully picking where you walk. And that, to me, is the real giveaway with a lot of these guys, like some of these I should probably not name any names, but some of those scholars, some of the talking heads on the various platforms that will address this, but address it in a way where they very carefully navigate around it. And again, it's like, if you believe this, then lead with it, talk about it, make a compelling case to me for it. But and I think we had talked about PragerU, Dennis Prager, the video where there's a couple of different videos out there of him making a case both for pornography, that pornography isn't bad because it all happens in your head, which again is in complete at complete and total odds with with the words of Christ. Like, you're literally saying, I'm hiding it from God in my head, so therefore it's okay. But he specifically talks about how animated child material. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have seen that clip at this point. Yeah.
And that's okay, because again, it's all in your head. You're not actually acting on it physically. And as anybody who's worked with troubled people, alcoholics, kids who've been in abusive situations or whatever, one of the things you notice if you've ever worked in mental health in any capacity, you know that you do not want to give certain people that ammunition. Like, there are certain people that, and a lot of them will tell you, I should not have access to that. If I have access to that, I'm going to do bad things because I shouldn't see that. It's like an alcoholic that's recovered and realizes, like, yeah, let's keep me away from the tequila because I know what I've done when I've done the tequila. And so the same thing, it's like giving someone something to fantasize about. It never stops there. That just becomes this, it becomes this thing that grows. It's not like I satisfied that itch by watching the animated child material. Sadly, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, so one of the things that I was trying to find earlier, he that serveth his land shall be satisfied with bread. question mark. Oh, sorry, that's a question mark. What is the meaning of the verse, he that serveth his land shall be satisfied with bread? If one enslaves himself to his land, continually toiling thereon, he shall be satisfied with bread. If not, he shall not be satisfied with bread. Okay. Resh Lakish also said, a heathen who keeps a day of rest deserves death. For it is written, a day and a night they shall not rest, and a master has said their prohibition is their death sentence. It's like, what? So
wait, hold on. Okay. So the amount of head up your own ass that you have to get to get to the point where the Sabbath means I get to kill people is wild to me.
Yeah. Rabbina said, even if he rested on a Monday. Now, so even if just for clarification, if you didn't take the Sabbath off, but you took Monday off.
You took any day off.
Yeah, any day off, you need to be snuffed out. But
oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. So things like that again, there's so many things that Jesus said that you're like, that really, I highly recommend anybody who is like looking at a lot of this, look at the 7 woes. I think it's in Matthew chapter 23. Look at when Jesus is.
You read that during, I think, as the introduction for your first Talmud video, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, because it's that so much of that, and also there's so much in that is, I think, so critical for Christians to understand is the. And by the way, the clock is not a psyop. It's just a cool old clock. And I've had people that genuinely think there's something up with my clock. And I found this in a thrift store a couple of towns over. And my wife and I had always wanted a clock like that. And we heard it chime in the store. And we're like, oh, we're getting that clock. And I forget how much it was. It was relatively cheap for an antique clock like that. And, we left there with the clock, and we got that just a couple of months after we bought this house, and because we're both big into antiques. So anyway, so when you hear the clock, there's not like, I've had people go, is that a metronome? Is that like and somebody said, like, pay close attention to when the clock strikes. It's like, oh man, the clock strikes when on the half hour and on the hour. Like that's what it does. So I could reach in there and stop that pendulum.
I don't know. You seem like a Fed to me. That's
exactly what a Fed would say.
That's exactly what a Fed would say. The more you deny, the more of a Fed you are.
It's so funny when I hear that. Whenever it's funny in YouTube, everybody thinks everybody else is a Fed. So anytime somebody says that, I think of that story, and I think like, man,
I've been accused more times than I can count at this point of being controlled op, deep fake, whatever. Like, how did this guy get this YouTube channel off the ground so quickly? He must have like backing from Mossad. He's just and on the one hand, like, I find it funny more than anything, but I think that it's probably good. I think that it is probably indicative of a level of skepticism that we've not seen for like the past 100 years in American history, a level of distrust in the government, a level of distrust in public figures. Like, this is the thing that I think is great, is that I anticipated, back when the mainstream media started to completely just flounder and die, back when YouTube people started to get more views, basically like as Joe Rogan surpassed and eclipsed the entire mainstream news. I knew, I was like, all right, well, it's just a matter of time before they start bringing in their people onto these online platforms and podcasts and start feeding us Fed slop through a new chapter or a new channel.
Yes.
But people are so skeptical. Like, nobody trusts anybody now, which is just amazing. I celebrate it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think this is where, again, to quote scripture, by their fruits you shall know them. So that's my thing, is look at somebody's output. Is there, are they going in a good direction? And if they are, good for them. If they deviate from that, then call them out. It's just like, to me, it's like anybody else in our lives. It's like, it's amazing to me the way people will defend politicians they've never met, more than they would defend a brother, sister, aunt, uncle, mother, child, whatever. They will defend a politician they've never met in these absurd ways. And that's something I bring up a lot at my church is how, like, we got to stop doing that as Christians. That like, if somebody does something stupid or something evil, say that's stupid and evil. Like, that should stop. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're doing something that's stupid and evil, we don't have to make an excuse for it. We don't have to try to make some kind of case for it. We just call it out and say that's stupid or that's evil, and they shouldn't be doing that. So
I wanted to loop back on something you had said earlier, because I wanted to touch a little bit more on, just to tie it back into the Talmud again.
Sure.
You had mentioned that it's a big part of the frustration for you, it sounds like, and for me as well, is that it's really difficult to have an honest conversation about it. It seems like 98% of the conversations that are had about the Talmud are of one of two camps, and both of them are intellectually dishonest to a great extent. There's either the people that are gaslighting us into thinking that there's absolutely nothing objectionable or wrong or evil about this book, and then there's other people that are deliberately, I think, taking things out of context or mischaracterizing them. And to be fair, a lot of that things that are allegedly taken out of context aren't, because there just isn't a context in which it's appropriate for a lot of these things to happen. But I think that I'm looking for more whistleblowers. I'm looking for more. I was reading about I forget what it was called, but basically this book burning that took place in France in I think it was 1242. When this rabbi turned coat and turned whistleblower and went to, I guess, the religious authority of the day, the Christian authority of the day in France, and said, hey, by the way, there's all this horrible stuff in the Talmud about Christ and just generally like all of this really objectionable stuff. And it led to this kind of court proceeding almost. I'm butchering this because I just read about it like yesterday, and I need to do a deeper dive. But basically the end result was that there was this very public, not trial, but like a legal proceeding where these rabbis were called, hey, what is this?
The Talmud Unmasked, the Secret Rabbinical Teachings Concerning Christians by L.B. Prenatus.
I've heard of this.
And I think book. It came from what you're discussing. I think that is a product of that era.
So the long story short, the rabbis of the day were, because none of the Christians in question could read the source material. I don't think that there was an English translation necessarily. It was probably in the original Hebrew and Aramaic. But the conclusion of the trial, they were called to defend the Talmud. And the result of that was that every Talmud in France was gathered up and burned. So, and I think that's kind of like my, you can go and find the catechism, the Catholic catechism online and read the whole thing. The Quran has not changed in the entirety of its existence, and you can find it. It's not hard to find. There's this level of transparency, even the issues that Christianity and Islam, I'll just pick those two because those are the big ones, the other Abrahamic religions, there's a level of transparency. Right. There's a level of like, they're very out in the open. Like, this is what we believe. Even the crazy ones, even the ones that are like the Christian Zionists versus the Islamic fundamentalists, like the ones that are trying to kill people and use these books to justify it. They're very transparent about it. There's not a lot of obfuscation. It's like, yeah, this is how I'm interpreting it. And because of that, we should bomb these people or we should bomb those people or whatever. But you don't find that. And that's with the Talmud, with just kind of rabbinic teaching generally. There's this deliberate obfuscation, this deliberate gaslighting. I crave so much for there to be more honest dialogue about it. And I think that the lack of honest dialogue about it is the reason why there has not been more moral progress made. something that blew my mind. I'm learning more and more about Catholicism. I'm attending OCIA. I want to learn about it and undo a lot of the programming that I've received that I've been wrong about over the years. And one of the things that blew my mind was that in Vatican II, they released this thing, I think it's called De Verbum. And it's just this document, it's this official Catholic document that basically lays out why they don't view the Old Testament in a literal framework in the same way that, say, non-denominational evangelical Christians very often do, treat every word of the Bible as the literal, verbatim, historically accurate spoken word of God. The Catholics have been around long enough to where they've like, well, no, like some of this is metaphor, some of this is, it's not meant to be taken literally. And that solves so many problems for me personally, and I think for a lot of other people. With the Talmud and with rabbinic teachings, the stagnation, the moral stagnation that I see when I look at it, I think is a consequence of this very deliberate obfuscation and lying, just straight up lying about the contents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I just went on for a minute. I'll let you.
No.
Jump off of that.
That's and I think this is where, if any of your viewers or my viewers that are, again, not familiar with a lot of this, I think it's also important to understand the relationship of rabbinic Judaism to Mosaic law. And I think this is one of those that I didn't understand as a young man growing up in an evangelical church. I just assumed when you would hear Jews or when you'd hear about Israel, even though I grew up in a church that did not subscribe to the dispensational kind of views or the Christian Zionist views, that still had permeated enough of the Christian culture that when you hear about Israel and you hear about Jews, you think, oh, of the Bible, like it's this straight line going back several thousand years, and that's what it is. And the more I dug into it, the clearer it became that they don't view themselves like that, but they want very badly to create that look. That branding is really important, but that's not at all what it is. And just a quick Cliff Notes explanation of rabbinic Judaism: Mosaic law required the existence of the temple, and once all that was wiped out in 70 A.D., Judaism had to retool itself into in order to continue, they had to retool the religion into an almost totally unrecognizable form, which is what we have with rabbinic Judaism that was all based on the teachings of the Pharisees and what became the Talmud. So, but rabbinic Judaism is younger than Christianity. But the branding has been very effective.
Hold on, I gotta the fact that thought has never occurred to me, because like I knew that, but that just broke my brain a little bit. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, but once you realize that, and it's funny, I had that epiphany about I guess about maybe 8 years ago or so, when I was reading the works of Josephus and really starting to dig in the Talmud and going back and forth. And that's the crazy thing, is when you start studying the Bible on your own without somebody holding your hand and saying, hey, this is what this means or something, you just start reading it for yourself, so much of this stuff starts to click. And I pointed this out on a Facebook discussion group that I thought I was talking to fairly like-minded people. And one of the guys was getting really upset with me because I did not subscribe to the whole Jewish roots thing and wasn't. And finally, when he kept pushing me on this, I finally said, rabbinic Judaism is younger than Christianity. So we don't have common roots. Like Mosaic law, yes, but Mosaic law and the Israelites and all that ended with the temple. So it's like rabbinic Judaism that actually is younger than us. So they don't really have some common thing there that I need to get into. A lot of the stuff that they have is stuff that was invented several hundred years later. And this guy got so upset, I got kicked out of the group. And it wasn't like I was name calling or anything else. I was just articulating all this. And that was when I started to realize just how pervasive this influence is. And a lot of these people that are hiding that believe this and are pushing this in secret, and they do well right up until the point that you point out, hey, wait, what about this thing that's sitting right here out in the open? And then that's when the gloves come off. So, but yeah, that's Rabbinic Judaism. Understanding that is real important to breaking down the whole branding of Israel is Israel of the Bible. So, but anyway, I'm trying to think if I've got any other stuff that I want to. Oh, so one of the things that this is, I think this is the one about the small child. I'll skip that and go to.
We can, so like I said, anything that you want to touch on, like I want to include some of that in the part of this interview that's going to be public facing, but we can talk about whatever, and we'll just keep that behind. We won't have that public facing. It's up to you.
Sure. Okay. Well, here's, this is in Sanhedrin. This is,
So the two thoughts that come to me as we talk about stuff like this is, number one, I think that what someone might object to when we're pointing out these passages that are very clearly normalizing, regulating, basically making not such a big deal, grown people down to age 3. Something that we might say is like, okay, well, but like child marriage was just more common back then. And like, it's the moral progress of the time. And it's like, okay, but on the other hand, the New Testament or the Gospels were written approximately, roughly within a few hundred years of some of this stuff being written. Yeah. Or even like the New Testament predates these things actually being written down in Babylon. Right. So we've got moral progress where Christ is saying that I actually had this framed after our conversation the other day. It's literally better to kill yourself. It's Matthew 18:6. Literally better to kill yourself
yes.
than to cause harm to a child or cause a child to sin. And even taking like the dual meaning of that to mean like to be childlike in Christ and to be a young believer, fine. But he also emphasized again and again and again,
don't mess with the kids.
Don't hurt kids. Don't mess with the kids. Don't cause kids to stumble. Don't cause kids to sin. Better to kill yourself, quite literally.
Which made him a hateful bigot. Because obviously, I mean, there's no other way to take that.
It's such so that's the first thought, is that, like clearly at least some people at that time recognized that children and the innocence of children was worth protecting. And the other thing that occurs to me has now escaped my head and I can't remember it. It'll come back to me, I'm sure. Hey folks, you may have noticed that some portions of this interview have been edited out. So while we say thank you to the $5 and up channel members, I wanted to really quickly address that. Truth be told, this interview was originally about 3 hours long, and I had to cut out about 40 minutes, in large part because we dig into some stuff that I'm pretty sure would not be okay per the YouTube community guidelines. And so Mitch and I decided to make the full, unredacted, unedited, raw version of the interview available as an exclusive video on his Odyssey channel. The cut portions include some discussion of the spicier Talmud passages, but also we go into Mitch's background. We talk about other books that he got in trouble for talking about on YouTube. We talk about mind control, all kinds of fun stuff. So please do consider going to check out that Odyssey channel. I consider Mitch to be a good friend at this point, and it would really mean a lot to me if we could make his inevitable removal from YouTube less painful. And if you do decide to skip over there, then maybe let this video play on mute in the background so that it doesn't hurt my metrics too terribly. And before you go, please be sure to like, subscribe, hype, whatever, do all the fun stuff. Also be sure to check out the merch shop. We got a sweet cat. I got a sweet cat back here. But we've also got a Judeo-Christian t-shirt back there that I'm pretty happy with, so go get you one of those too. All right, folks, sorry to interrupt. We'll get back to the interview.
Well, I think there is definitely the turning point of the human soul, and you got into that a little bit talking about Carl Jung, but I think the turning point of the human soul is evidenced in the New Covenant. And it's kind of funny. The magician Penn makes this comment sometimes that's to reinforce his atheism about that I do all the raping and murder that I want, which is none. And it's like, well, okay, that's great, but we have prisons full of rapists and murderers.
Yeah.
So what gives? like that's great. You are not criminally insane. Fantastic. But we all know, every one of us that is now created knows, in every part of us, every conscious part of us, we know, even the guys that murder and rape know that's bad. They know to hide that activity.
Right.
And you think, you go back, 1,000 years or so, and no, not 1,000 years, let's say 2,000 or 3,000 years, and just about every civilization on the planet was practicing some form of human sacrifice openly, like making giant structures where, hey, we're going to take a dude up here and carve out his heart today, and everybody's going to be cool with that. And at some point that ceased, and people realized, like, that's messed up. Like, there's still things that happen like that, but now people hide it. And when we see it, we universally know this is very bad. Like, if right now I'm in West Texas and we're suffering a severe drought, exactly no one has offered up their virgin daughter to stop the drought. Like, we all universally know that's not the way things work now. And you probably heard this too when you were younger and grade school and all, and you would hear about these old civilizations, and it was like, well, they were just too stupid to understand the way crops grew and all this, so they thought killing a virgin on the solstice, that'd fix it all. And it's like, the older I get, the less I buy that, because the idea that these were just incredible, like the Mayans, here were people who had mapped out the planets, centuries ahead of where they were in time, and knew all this stuff about the placement of the Earth and all the planets and everything else. But we're to believe they were too stupid to understand why crops grow. that they didn't understand the solstice. Oh no, the sun's about to disappear. So we got to kill somebody to bring the sun god back. It's like, no. And my point in bringing all this up is to say, obviously there was something going on. There was something spiritual that was being, some kind of change was being affected by that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. So there was that served some very real purpose, and then it ended. And to me, that is proof positive. The fact that even Penn openly says, hey, I know it is literally Jeremiah 31:31. This is written on my soul, or written on my heart, that I know not to murder or rape or whatever. So that, to me, that's an important kind of tipping point for the human existence, is that you would be hard pressed to find anyone now who would say, like in the Israelites when Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, and they're like, what we need to do? It sure has taken Moses a while. What we need to do? Let's melt down all our watches and our jewelry and make a god to Baal. Make an idol to Baal. I mean, there's been times at my church where we might have started a little late, but never did I think, it's running, the service is running a little late. Maybe Moloch should be, maybe we need to make something to Moloch. It's like the insanity of that. And yet we have evidence that these things were going on. And that's one of the things in the Talmud, is the specific circumstances under which you could sacrifice your child to Moloch and it'd be okay. It's like that there. And that's something, again, I would love to hear Dennis Prager do a segment on that. Explain that to me, like, break that down for me. Explain why that, like, under any circumstance, why that would be okay. Like, I don't, again, I would love for there to be another, a few sentences later, like, psych, nope, gotcha. But anyway, but I think that is, all of this only works if you really don't think God can see inside your head. Because what I've got pulled up here is, again, if you view God as magic robot, then this is, I guess you can make this stuff work. But if you view God as a creator God who created our soul and knows us as individuals, then this kind of stuff is just absurd. But it's talking about how so these are all the stipulations about what constitutes murder. And some of this is just ridiculous. But Rabbah said, if one bound his neighbor and he died of starvation, he is not liable to execution. Rabbah also said, if he bound him in the sun and he died, or in a place of intense cold and he died, he is liable. But if the sun was yet to appear, or the cold yet to make itself felt, he is not. So if I bind my neighbor and I I shove him in my empty swimming pool, and then I turn on the water hose later on because I forgot he was in the pool and he drowns to death, I'm not liable. And there's all these different versions of that thinking about
it's just a series of really messed up trolley problems, basically.
Yes, that that's it. But if Rabbah said, if one thrust his neighbor into a pit in which there was a ladder so that he could have climbed out, and then another came along and removed it, or even if he himself hastened to remove it, he is not liable for the victim's death, because when he threw him in, he could have climbed out. So, case closed. It's things like that you're like, no, but this is where you start like going back and looking at a lot of murder cases, and you start to see if this is another rabbit hole to go down. I think it's called a Beth Din, Beth space Din, is a rabbinical court. And this is something I'm just talking off the cuff here. So you can look up this case and see, but Steve prosecuted Jared Kushner's dad for a really bizarre case involving like adultery and blackmail and all kinds of stuff. And Chris Christie, this is one of the reasons why Trump and Chris Christie had this massive falling out. And I think Chris Christie's a scumbag too. I don't think he's any better than them.
I think you can't get into a position like that anymore without being a total scumbag. So,
but he, the curious thing there is the reason he fell afoul of that political group there at the time refused to turn that over to a rabbinical court, because Kushner Sr., his rabbi, was saying this is like an internal matter and this should not be tried in a public like Gentile court. This should be tried in a rabbinical court. And Chris Christie was like, nope, you're going to big kid court. And off he went. So if you get a chance, look up that case, because it's a weird case, and it's a pretty standard case of like blackmail and sexual intrigue and all kinds of stuff. But I think they like set this guy up and then tried to blackmail with his infidelity and all. But anyway, the take home thing there is more about that rabbinical court more than anything else. And there's a really good book that has a lot of information about some of those courts and things like that, called Waters Flowing Eastward, which I have reviewed on my channel. I think I've reviewed it a couple of times or talked about it. There's one kind of tongue-in-cheek book review that I did, warning people not to buy it because it validates it authenticates the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
You know what's great is that I look up this book. I just punch that title into Google. And one of the first things it says is the text promotes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And I'm like, okay. And I think you mentioned this in one of your videos where, like, as soon as I see that now, and it's unfortunate that this is where we're at, but as soon as I see anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, I'm immediately like, oh, well, there's probably something to that. I should probably look into it. Like, this is the new standard now. To where am I likely to find some nugget of truth is when Google immediately tells me, oh, there's nothing to see here. Don't look too close at that. So interesting.
Yes. Well, and one of the things in information warfare now that I've noticed that And I guess you could say this is kind of an extrapolation of poisoning the well, is where.
Hey, watch out! That's an anti-Semitic phrase right there.
Oh, that's right. That. Yeah, it is. It is. Oh, silly me. Yeah, but yeah, I forget. Yeah, the roots of that are blood libel.
Not great. So it wasn't true until it was that one time, but any other time, it's not totally not true.
But bringing it up is the problem.
That is such a problem. Yeah.
Simon of Trent is another one that.
This is the thing that pisses me. And again, just to tie it back into like the information warfare and trying to make sense of things, is that I've tested it before because I did my Israeli war crimes video and I talked about Operation Cast Thy Bread and you know, the IDF, or what became the IDF, poisoning wells with typhoid. And I'm like, okay, so now I'll ask Google every now and again. I'll be like, hey, Google, are there any historically demonstrated times where Jewish people poisoned wells? And it's like, no, that has never, ever happened. And then I'll be like, but what about Operation Cast Thy Bread? And it's like, okay, well, that one time it did happen, but literally any other time it's a total lie. It's like, okay, what are we doing now? Like,
well, and it's like anytime someone brings up a case that has false accusations, like, are there people in the Me Too movement or whatever who've made false accusations, false allegations of sexual misconduct against other people? Are there false accusers?
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's like, that doesn't mean that crime doesn't exist because someone used that to leverage something else. That's like,
right.
Like if somebody gets framed for shoplifting, that doesn't mean now we have to throw out all the shoplifting cases because that shoplifting doesn't exist. It's like, no, there are times when people are falsely accused. And then there's times when those things very much happened exactly as advertised. So it's like, just because someone frames someone else for this thing this time doesn't mean that thing doesn't happen. In fact, that's how we know those things happen, is because then people use those things to gain leverage. And that reminded me of, there's another case I was just thinking of. And now this we're definitely going to have to do this again, because there's definitely a lot of stuff that I'm thinking of as I try to pick out some things for this video that I think give the overall idea behind it. Because again, I think the way most of us operate is if my government passes a law like, don't steal, if somebody says don't steal or whatever, I don't need a whole lot of clarification on that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is self-evident. I don't need, 100 pages to help me understand what exactly is stealing and all the ways around it. Like, well, okay, is it stealing because this guy actually, he's from the other town, the whole finders keepers thing. That's also like, if someone loses his property and you find it, if like there's certain rules depending on if he's a fellow Jew or not. And I should also say, before I get too far into this, the parable of the Good Samaritan, Rabbi Tovia Singer, when you get a chance, watch his video about why the parable of the Good Samaritan is anti-Semitic. Because you're like, this is the most straightforward, basic story about being a decent human being that you could ever conjure up. And it's like, when I saw that video pop up, because I was looking through his YouTube page, and I was like, oh, get out.
It's anti-Semitic to say that you shouldn't be racist. Is that what I'm what I'm taking away from this? The quintessential, like, the thing upon which modern Western Enlightenment principles and the sovereignty of the individual and treating people with basic human dignity, that story is anti-Semitic somehow.
I think it was Stephen Sizer. I may be getting this wrong, but there's a British theologian. I think it's Stephen Sizer. I might be wrong, but he had a great explanation of the parable of the Good Samaritan, and explained, how important that is, because the way it's described is this guy who's beaten up and left to die. He's stripped naked and dying on the ground. So there's no, in the parable, at least the way it's described, the way Jesus tells this to the Pharisees, there's no identifier that says he's Jewish. or that
Right.
he's an Israelite or whatever
Right.
you want to call him. Okay.
It's almost like his race was not important.
Right. But he makes it deliberately, and this is what Stephen Sizer points out, that he just deliberately created a hypothetical where you don't know what this guy's allegiances are.
Yep.
And that is by design. And then all the priests go around him on the other side of the street and all this. And then the Samaritan walks up and is like, oh crap, dude, that sucks. And helps him out, puts him up in an inn and gives him money to take care of him. And then when he comes back through town, checks on him, makes sure he's doing okay. And then he says at the end, because all this is in response to the Pharisees are saying, yeah, but who's my neighbor? And again, that's where you get into that Talmudic thinking of they're trying to look for a way out. So he creates a hypothetical with no way out. And he says, okay, who was the neighbor? In this story, who was the neighbor? And that's where the Pharisees are forced to say the one that helped him. And they don't even want to say Samaritan because the Samaritans were not their buddies.
Yeah.
And they have to reluctantly admit that the Samaritan was his neighbor. And he says, go and do likewise. Like, this is it. Like, you see somebody in need, you help them. And listen to Tovia Singer's look up his breakdown of that. And you'll be pounding your head against your desk by the end of it, because it is just insane. It's like, how can you take this so incredibly simple story of, like you said, just basic human decency, of just articulating just basic human values, and then turning that into he's attacking us. like if you take that parable as a personal attack, like, you might be a psychopath. Like, I need to do a whole thing like Jeff Foxworthy's "You Might Be a Redneck," but you might be a psychopath. Like, if you need 20 pages of single space text explaining what theft is and is not, you might be a psychopath. Like,
well, it isn't. Yeah, because it isn't even about like wanting to avoid harm. It's, how do I get to do the thing that I want to do, but still feel good about myself and still feel righteous and still feel like I've pulled one over on God. Like, it's just, okay, I'm not allowed to walk from point A to point B. How do I get to point B? Like, what route do I have to take to get there anyway?
Well, and then it becomes a virtuous thing that, hey, I did this and I killed this guy, but I did it in a way that hid my motive. So technically speaking, I got away with it. And again, all that stuff, you start looking at a lot of these criminal cases, totally different when you start going down that rabbit hole of looking at the way Talmudic thinking is, and that whole, I didn't leave him in the sun when I tied him up and left him in the desert. It was 60 degrees in the Mojave. The sun wasn't out. It was actually kind of cold. So, that's why I left him in 4 different coats and tied him up and left him on the ground, because it was actually cold. And then I didn't know it was going to get up to 122 degrees that day. But that whole section about like murder and talking about all these different scenarios, like if you shoot an arrow at a guy and he has a shield, and the arrow kills him, you're not guilty of murder because he could have shielded himself. and it's some of the thought process on that. That's the main. I have several passages like that outlined that in there, but about the guy falling into the pit, and then the other guy. So you shove this guy into a pit, and then your buddy comes by. And he didn't know somebody was down in that pit, and he takes the ladder because he's got to go get his cow out of another pit. Okay. So now the guy is stuck in the pit and dies. But you didn't kill him because your buddy took the ladder and he didn't know that this guy was down in the pit. So when you shoved him in the pit, he had the ability to climb back out. But yeah, things like that and this is again where you could start to see a lot of contemporary applications of that, of like, well, I shot him in front of a hospital. So what gives? He could easily have run in there and had them pack that gunshot wound. So, and there's several examples that are like that. Well, he had the ability to treat the wound. So,
and this kind of By the way, I remembered the other thing that I was going to say about the child exploitation stuff. So maybe I'll take this and kind of like move it back in the edit or something like that. But to just kind of touch on the idea of the total lack of concern with the outcome. In other words, the harm being done is not even, it's not even a part of the calculus. Like there's no part of this anal retentive formula that's being constructed that factors in the impact, the harm being done, the just treating people with basic human decency. And when I think about the course of human history and the way that we've thought about things like, say, the age of consent, obviously there has been a significant amount of moral progress to that. I think that our understanding of the prefrontal cortex and the development of like our ability to understand the implications of our decisions and things like that. By the way, 18 is the most arbitrary age imaginable for consent. If we're going based on your ability to give informed consent, age of consent should be 25. Like you should be 25 if that's what we're going by. But I guess we kind of split the difference between your sexual development in your early teens and then your cognitive development in your mid 20s. And we're like, 18, whatever. We'll just go with that. It's fine. But regardless of that, I'm willing to extend some amount of grace for older cultures that didn't understand prefrontal cortex. They only understood the physical development of the body. And they're like, okay, well, once you are capable of being sexually active, then you're good to go. It's still not ideal, but there's a level of grace that I can extend to that way of thinking. It's good that we're not thinking that way anymore, but I can understand that. There is nothing and never has been anything that excuses or justifies or makes okay prepubescent engagement. There never has been, nor could there be. Like it doesn't even make sense within the context of, and this, you see this as part of these conversations in that one that I pointed out, the Yevamot 61a to 61b. A lot of the concern is, well, these people are undeveloped, so they can't bear children. So technically this is, it's kind of like spilling seed, you know, it's kind of like, well, you're just engaging in this there's not any concern about just how messed up it is and why that would be a problem morally or otherwise. Anyway, that was the that there's no, again, because we're not looking at anything internal. So if I can't see it, it must not be there. So therefore, you know, it's out of sight, out of mind. And and this is where I think one of the books I read that I think really turned me around on that. And it's funny that now this book has picked up a lot of popularity in the last 10 years. And I like to think that maybe I'm a part of that, but is The Assault on Truth by Jeffrey Mason, I think is his name. And excellent book about Freud's seduction theory. And Freud his original theory was basically what most of us know. What's pretty obvious if you work around troubled kids is that a lot of adult neuroses has its origins in child abuse, intimate abuse, shall we say. And, you know, again, this is not rocket surgery. A lot of this is pretty obvious stuff. But when he presented that in Vienna around the turn of the century, all the intelligentsia, and now it makes a lot more sense when you look at these certain religious factions that he was bowing to. It makes a lot more sense that basically they told him, if you expect to go anywhere, you need to disavow that. Like that needs to get thrown in the round file. So that's where he came back with the theory that, the whole idea of, the child lusting after his mother or her father, that these weird repressed
urges, about the jealousy of the child with the spouse, with the parents, and these sexual feelings that they're having, and these repressed things then manifest themselves as memories of abuse. So in a way, it was like the original false memory syndrome, the original gaslighting of victims in the worst possible way of, the classic, tell me about your mother, was basically telling these victims, you just imagine it all. This is all your fantasy. You're literally victim blaming at this point. You're saying, yeah, I know you have these memories of your dad coming into your room and doing these things to you, but that's actually you fantasizing about your dad. And you're like, ah. And what's crazy about that book is he exposes that, and then he shows the trail of several other of Freud's students that stumbled onto exactly the same thing. And we're like, hey, Freud, guess what I figured out? And he immediately attacked them and shut them down. Or like, unless you step back from that theory, I am not backing you. And yeah, it's like, that's nuts. Like, so he knew his findings were correct, but he knew which side his bread was buttered on, and he acted accordingly. And that's, to me, that is one of the saddest, most inexcusable things. And that book it's a heartbreaking book. When you read some of the stories in there of some of the cases, it's really, really tragic reading about some of that. Because again, all of it comes back to what you're saying is there was no regard whatsoever for the impact on the child victim. And I wanted to find, there's one more thing I wanted to find in here that this is 58, I think it's 58b in Sanhedrin.
In the
Sanhedrin,
okay.
Yeah, 58b. But it says, a heathen who violates his neighbor's wife unnaturally is free from punishment. Why so? To his wife, but not to his neighbors, and he shall cleave, which excludes unnatural intercourse. What this means, what you're talking about, this is where things get really dark, because this is probably the clearest sentence in this whole passage that explains this. But basically, an unnatural act, like say something in the posterior, like so when Scripture says that a man shall cleave to his wife, then they interpret that cleave as the act of sexual intercourse, and that act of sexual intercourse is a mutually satisfying act for both participants. Okay. So an unnatural act is one that does not provide equal satisfaction for both participants. Okay. So if he is doing something in an orifice, in a different orifice, let's just put it that way.
Sure.
Then she is not receiving satisfaction. Therefore, he is not committing adultery. Safe. And then that's where you're like, oh, because when Clinton, if you're my age, you remember very famously when Clinton said, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. And
that is an excellent Bill Clinton, by the way.
Thank you.
Just want to say.
Someone the other day, I did that in a video. I was doing something with Clinton's voice, and someone said they were not watching the video. They were just listening to it, and they thought I'd actually pulled up a clip of Clinton. And I was like, man, I can die now. I have, to know that I've got that voice down. But anyway, that was the whole thing with Monica Lewinsky was according to the Talmud. And now see, again, this is where, I don't know if you've dug into the idea of the theory that Monica was a honeypot, which I don't think at this point many people would argue that. Now, whatever, I'm by no means defending Clinton at all, but I do find it interesting that I think he was unwilling to do Gulf War II on his time, and as a result, the whole Monica Lewinsky thing blew up on him.
Well, didn't they bomb like a pharmaceutical factory shortly after that as a way of kind of, so maybe that was him.
Okay.
maybe that was him buying, like he was like, all right. I'm not going to invade Iraq, but I'll bomb this pharmaceutical factory and we'll blame it on Al Qaeda. Or I have to look up the details, but there was something like that where like they blew up this
Well, I mean, they were still bombing. They had the whole no-fly zone, and they were bombing Iraq through all that. And so, I mean, it was like he was killing brown people. He was doing his due diligence. Yeah,
it's a great American tradition. At this point.
he just wasn't. He didn't do the whole boots on the ground, and I think Trump is kind of at that same point now where he's like, hey, I thought we were going to be able to do this whole thing with some bombing runs and then just get out. And it's like, nope, that's not how it works, dude. You're about to get sucked into something major. But anyway, that whole thing with Monica Lewinsky, though, is, Clinton using that Talmudic logic to say, hey, I did not have sexual relations. So I can't be, that's why they got him for perjury, because he was using those tricks. Now, again, I think Clinton's a slime ball, and I'm by no means defending him as a great person or anything like that. I just think that was one of those times, and I think George Bush too, Bush Sr. was also, they were really pushing for him to go a lot farther than he did. And I think a lot of those guys didn't have the stomach for it and realized that, hey, I'm willing to bend over and take it only so much. But when you're getting to a point of possibly pushing us into World War III, that's where I draw the line. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. They just had to wait for somebody that was compromised enough, I guess. They didn't have that level of compromise until Trump, I guess. That's where we're at.
Now, I would say before we wrap it all up, I did want to. I've got a stack of books.
Okay,
because nice.
Dude, I get book recommendations, or I get requests for book recommendations all the time. So hit it.
So this is the Talmud Unmasked. And I think I mainly have this. This isn't the greatest book on this, but it's a good one. It's an old one. This was originally published, good night, I think over 100 years ago. This is copyright 1939, but originally 1892. So,
wow. Okay.
But I think this one is still available on Amazon. Okay. Probably not after I talk about it, but. But for now, it's there. Now, Peter Shaver's book, Jesus in the Talmud, is a good one. Again, this is really valuable just because you're hearing it from the team. You're hearing the party line from the party. So there's no mistaking. This isn't some conspiracy dude in his basement writing, mean stuff about the Jews. This is Peter Shafer speaking forthrightly about his beliefs. Now, this is part of the supplemental information, which is kind of hard to find. That's kind of an appendix of information on the Talmud that used to come with this book, if you can find it. This is The Plot Against Christianity by Elizabeth Dilling. Excellent book, but to find it in its original form, where it had, this is the exhibits of evidence to support her book. So I found the book, and then when I saw it kept referencing this other material, I had to go to Amazon. No, I had to go to eBay to find this. But this is an excellent book. Now, these two. This is Michael Hoffman's Judaism's Strange Gods.
You mentioned this one.
Yes, and this is one that I found in the Judaism section in Half Price Books in the store that used to be right by my old house. And I was going through the Judaism section, and I saw this, and I was like, that's funny, a funny name for a book. And then I pulled it out and started reading. I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of nuts. And so I got it. So I think whoever was putting the books in obviously did not realize the full import of this book and shelved it right there along with all the Hebrew studies stuff.
Some teenager making minimum wage, whatever. Judaism, okay. That's good.
And as a result, pro tip for those of you that shop at Half Price Books, check the Judaism section often and look for Hoffman because his stuff has been banned. They will shelve a lot of his stuff with the Judaism religious books without realizing what they are. So always check, because I lucked out and I got Judaism Discovered, which is a massive book. And I forgot to get that one out. It's probably, 3 inches or more thick, massive book. And at one point it was going for close to $1,000 before it got banned on Amazon. But, later on, he wrote this book, which is kind of a hybrid version of Judaism Discovered and Judaism Strange Gods. He basically took this and Judaism Discovered and made a little bit more readable, a little bit more concise version of the bigger book. Excellent book. Yeah, I think you have to go to his website now to get it. This one has been put in timeout. You can't find it on Amazon anymore, but excellent book if you can get it. This is one that's just so dense with information. You'll read a few pages and then you'll wind up going and Googling a bunch of stuff that you've never heard of before. And lots of good movies referenced in it. I mean, this dude is just, he's one of those guys I would love to just sit down and have a cup of coffee with and talk theology, because he is very well studied on this subject. And really weird side note, in Stigmata, which was a cattle mutilation newsletter that was put out by Tom Adams in Texas back in the 70s. It was put out from the late 70s all the way into, I think, the early 90s.
Sorry, a cattle mutilation
newsletter. Yes.
Okay.
And it was about this guy, Tom Adams, and Gary Massey were two guys here in Texas that were investigating cattle mutilations.
Like occult stuff? Or
yeah, well, they were trying to figure out what it was. At that time, it was, a lot of people didn't know, is it a cult? Is it aliens? Is it government or whatever? And these guys took a very balanced approach to it. They just took in all the information they could and they would put it back out to the public in the form of these newsletters, and people would submit tips and leads and reports, and they would compile this all and put this out in their newsletter. And one of the newsletters has a letter from Michael Hoffman, and about him explaining some of the, him kind of offering some of his thoughts on the cattle mutilation phenomenon. I wish I could remember it more in detail, but when I read that, I was like, holy crap, that has got to be the same Michael Hoffman, because the way he writes and what he's talking about, I'm like, this dude, so he is very well studied on a lot of these esoteric topics.
Interesting.
So definitely one to get. And a friend of mine in the Dallas area that he and I grew up together and have, in the last 15 years, have really gotten into deep discussions about all this stuff. And he and I both got this book around the same time. And we would wind up calling each other and texting and saying, hey, did you read this such and such? And comparing notes about a lot of the material in this. And it led to both of us digging into our Bibles a lot more, because again, there's so much stuff in the New Testament and the Old Testament that suddenly comes into sharp focus when you go, oh, okay, that's like a lot of the stuff in Ezekiel, when God is showing Ezekiel the idolatry that's happening in the temple. So, and then last but not least, this is a fun one. You Gentiles. By Maurice Samuel.
You have my attention.
Yeah. So this is good stuff. And
you got to give me more. What is that one about?
It's a screed against. It's not great as far as the writing, but it's a good insight into. It's basically his screed as a Jew against Gentiles.
Oh wow!
And,
okay.
Yeah. And I have another book by him too, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like he had some serious issues, but that's what it is. It's the question, which is, I guess, is the Jewish question, is there any special significance in the distinction I have so long cherished, the distinction of Jew, Gentile, not to be found in the class of distinctions implied in American foreigner or Englishman foreigner? Is there between us Jews and you Gentiles, that is between the Jew and the one hand and the Englishman, the Frenchman, and the American on the other hand, that which transcends all differences which exist among yourselves? So he goes on to basically spend an entire book articulating why he thinks he's better than than the other guy. So worth it for that.
The Google summary that I see here is significantly more let's just say, generous and charitable in its interpretation. And in fact, it manages to work in that he's just responding to anti-Semitism. Like, oh, okay, that's obviously, yeah. Well, that's the only thing that it could be. It couldn't be anything else. No. So,
and in fact, anytime something like this, if heaven forbid it predates the anti-Semitism, I'm guessing time travel is the reason. Yeah, obviously. Yeah,
clearly.
So let's see what year this is, because this is. He also wrote The Outsider and Whatever Gods. And
this is saying 1924.
That sounds about right.
So this would have been, so it's describing him as a Zionist thinker. So he would have been a part of the, I'm guessing, European Zionist movement, or it says he's Romanian British.
Wait a second. What kind of claptrap is that? I thought that he is from the Holy Land.
No. Okay, hold on. Romanian born, British and American Jewish. What is that? How does that even? That's a lot of different countries piled into this one person. Okay. Anyway.
Well,
he was a Jewish Zionist, so.
Yeah, well, and I think this is a good time for a station break about that mentality of the kind of the core of what we're talking about. I think this is really important. This is where I have big problems with some of the guys who make this a racial thing, where they say, to me, that's where the if you were to call it anti-Semitism, to me, anti-Semitism is dropping cluster munitions on actual Semites. That would be anti-Semitism. That not saying mean things about Howard Stern and his bad wig. That to me is like, that's just a dude with a messed up ideology and that explodes. But actual anti-Semitism would be like sodomizing prisoners with batons that happen to actually be Semites.
Yeah, well, it's
I'll leave it at
the paradox of the fact that I advocate for Palestinian self-determination as anti-Semitic is the wildest thing to me, given that Palestinians are Semites. It just doesn't. It never quite. I would rather Semitic children not be bombed. Well, then you're an anti-Semite. That doesn't make any. Doesn't make any fucking sense to me.
Yeah, and this is where I think it's so important that to me, that when I see people on I hate to say this, I don't want to just jumble everybody or put everybody in this bin like this, but some of the guys like the Nick Fuentes and types and the who's there. There's been a few others that really try to make it a more of a racial thing. And it's like, no, this is a very ideological thing. You're not born this way. And it's like, I'm not born Christian. You're not born Jewish. Now your parents might, be affiliated with Judaism or whatever and raise you that way. You might be raised in that faith, but that does not cause a biological difference in you. Like that's not, this is an ideological perspective that is put on you from an early age. That is, you are encouraged to have, but this is not a biological thing. And I take big issue with both sides of that. The people that say that are defending Judaism and saying that it's like a racial sort of thing, and the people that are attacking Judaism and talking like it's a racial thing. I think both are wrong, and both are horribly misguided in that idea that you're born really good or born really bad. And I think that's a really important distinction with all this. This is if you believe that you're not born believing these values or adhering to these values, this is something that is brought into your existence. So I don't think you just wake up one day and believe this.
I shared a video on my Twitter earlier today. There's this video going around right now of these very clearly like under 10 years old Orthodox Jewish Israeli children who were blocking a Palestinian ambulance from going anywhere and throwing rocks at it. And it's, you know, and so the ambulance has to like try to turn around without hitting anybody and like find another route to get to the hospital. And they weren't born with that. That has been drilled into them. And, you know, it's tragic. But, you know, it's the most charitable possible interpretation of the Israeli phenomena. And this is something that I've been trying to find a way to articulate, even if you're excluding any kind of a spiritual component to it. The most charitable secular explanation for what's happening right now is that this is the cycle of abuse perpetuating itself. Like the fact that these people have been, let's say, discriminated against for whatever reason, now that they found themselves into a position of power, it's no different than an abused child when it grows up and it has children and it feels entitled to regurgitate and live out that abuse through that power dynamic. It doesn't much change for me. It might change the diagnosis, but it doesn't change the prescription. And the prescription would be to excise this ideology and to, if nothing else, bring it into the light and examine it and let everyone see it and let everyone speak about it honestly. You know, just like any other abhorrent ideology, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So that's certainly been my intent. And this might be a good way to bookend it. I think it's nice to start with a disclaimer and end with a disclaimer. Again, like there's no part of me that is hateful towards anyone because of how they were born. I have nothing but love in my heart for all of God's creatures. And I think that criticizing an idea is not the same thing as criticizing someone's right to exist or to be free of violence or free of harm. I don't wish harm on anybody. I don't wish violence on anybody. And I certainly wouldn't advocate for anything like that. To me, the solution is to speak freely and to be able to examine these things freely. And and by the way, I share your deep and profound desire for someone in a position of authority, some rabbi, to come out and just explain all of this stuff publicly.
Yeah,
if there's nothing to see here, then just come out and explain all of it from start to finish. Do a whole series on it. It'll be the most watched thing on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. And say like, okay, yeah, this and this passage in Sanhedrin, that's, you know, it's there for historical purposes, but we don't really believe that. And we happily distance ourselves from these ridiculous positions.
Yeah.
And you know, that's something about it. And I was trying to explain this to somebody at church the other day about, you know, our different, the difference between some of the problems inherent with this ideology and say, you know, like say I can have a productive discussion. We may not agree at the end with someone of the a Muslim person or someone of the Muslim faith. I could have a productive discussion with them where we can talk it out and neither one of us is going to be violent or anything else. As soon as I say, you know, make it clear, and not that they would be violent if I didn't say this, but all the discussions I've ever had with Muslims that I've been in contact with, as soon as I make it clear, like, hey, I do not believe that the political entity called Israel in the Middle East is a God-breathed thing. It's a man-made thing, and I don't think it has any greater or lesser import than any other country around it. As soon as I make that clear, then we can actually have an honest discussion. We may not agree, but we can actually have a discussion about theology. But as soon as if I go the Zionist path, I'm basically saying you are the scripted villain in this story. You cannot be good. Like, in fact, in fact, there's no point in even trying to convert you because you're about to get steamrolled along with all your brothers in the West Bank or wherever because you're in the way of the Greater Israel Project.
Right.
You know, so that right there is, as soon as we strip away that kind of thinking, that scripted villain thinking of again, there's this end times thing, and these guys are the villains, and so there's no point in even converting them or even talking to them rationally. Like, I've literally met people at church that would not speak to a Muslim because they'll try to kill me. I'm like, are you serious? Are you that like? But whereas this ideology, you really do have that demarcation between us and them. It's like, we are literally a totally different kind of human. We believe, if you believe this, that we cannot interact with you the same way. And we literally have to maintain this boundary between us. And we don't want to convert you. In fact, we would like you to become a Noahide, where you can follow these 7 laws and you can be a slave to us. But, and I actually met a guy who was becoming a Noahide. That was the first I'd ever heard of it, just about, I guess that was about 11 or 12 years ago. And it blew my mind. He had renounced Christ so that he could become a Noahide. And I was like, are you serious? Is this really a thing? But that's the whole idea. Like, if I, as a Christian, if a non-Christian found out that I was running a brothel, for instance, let's say even I'm in the counties in Nevada where that's legal, okay, and somebody finds out that I'm a Christian that's operating a brothel, you would say, like, you would be right to say, that's messed up. Why are you doing that? And my defense was, it's okay because all the girls working in my brothel are all non-Christian. You would say, like, no, that's absurd. That's actually worse. Like, you should be bettering people, not dragging them down. And it's that kind of thinking, I think, again, that is so problematic throughout this Talmud thinking, is a very predatory attitude of, like, the outsider can be exploited. Whereas as a Christian, there's things that I don't believe I should do that are problematic for me. And I would like for other people not to do them. Now, I'm not going to try to pass laws and make it illegal for them to do things based on my religion. But there's things that I would not encourage a young girl to do immoral things if she's not a Christian, so that I can enjoy those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would not see that as like a crop to be harvested of, oh, well, they're not Christian, so I can take full advantage of them. And if they become a Christian, that actually becomes a liability. So anyway, I say all that to say, yeah, that whole idea of us versus them, of saying, hey, we are in this class of people, and that's kind of one of the hallmarks of a predator, is somebody that doesn't want, they need prey. So the more you don't want to convert people and bring them in, because they're not good marks anymore. As soon as they wind up in your, why would you want that anyway? So, yeah. But yeah, anyway, I see that I'm always wary of a religion that does not proselytize. Because even though there's plenty of people who've approached me over the years and tried to get me to go to this church or that, or join this religion or whatever, I respect that, because it's like, if you believe you have found the way, of course you want to share that. Sure. Of course, if you find a miracle drug that has improved your life, you want to share that. When I find out there's certain foods that are harming me, I want to share that. I want to tell other people, hey, you should avoid that. That will give you ulcers, So it's always a little scary when you have a group of people that doesn't want to do that and actively works to not spread. So, or spread only within a very strict.
That's a really interesting point that I'd never considered before, is that the exclusivity and remaining the perpetual minority is baked in. It is core to the ideology that we are separate, and our separateness and our being better or chosen or whatever is a core piece of it. So we don't want you, Goy, to be a part of this. Like, that's the whole point, is that there is that barrier. There's a story that was in the Gospels. There's the story of Christ who's approached by a Canaanite woman whose daughter is possessed. And she's begging him. She said, please, I know, like, she calls him Lord, like, Lord, Son of David. Like, she is like calling him as the Messiah, even though she is not a part of this bloodline. She is an outsider. And this story always used to bother me when I was a kid, because his initial reaction is to, he's role playing the role of a rabbi.
Yes.
He does this to demonstrate, and it blew my mind. I just realized this week. He's role playing the role of a Jewish rabbi by, not only does he ignores her first, but then he says it is not right for a parent to give his children's food to a dog.
Yes. Yes. I thought the exact same thing as a kid when I read that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow,
that's harsh.
But
and then she immediately comes back and is like, yeah, but even the dogs get the crumbs, even the, and it's like, oh, touche. It's like,
it almost brought me to tears.
Yes.
In the middle of church, when I realized, like, he's doing this as a demonstration to his disciples. Yes. He's like, because this is par for the course for them. They're like, yeah, of course, she's a dog, whatever. He was role playing. He was cosplaying as a rabbi, so that he could then show them, like, no, like, and to me, like, now that I'm thinking about it, it's even like he's kind of trolling them a little bit, like just a little bit of like, just a little tongue in cheek, like, nah, this is it reminds me, there's another story later on in the Gospels where he's walking back to Jerusalem, and they come across I think it's a Samaritan village, and he sends two of them out.
The woman at the well, yeah.
No. This is where he sends them out to secure a room for them to stay in, and they reject him. They say, "Oh no, you can't stay here." And his disciples come back to him and they say, "Lord, they've rejected you. Can you believe this? Well, we've read the Torah, we've read the Old Testament. We know what's up. We should call down fire from heaven to smite them, right?" And they weren't wrong. They weren't wrong to say, like, this is how things are done. This is how God handles his business. And Jesus rebukes them. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. I've come to save man, not to destroy him. And so much of the Gospels makes more sense in context and in contrast with the Talmud. And everything he did was to turn this hypocritical, you are cups that are full of dead things, but you polish the outside. Like this, just you put heavy loads on men's backs and carry none for yourself.
You even use a little finger to help them. Yeah,
right. And so much of Christianity makes more sense the more that you look into the Talmud and you realize how corrupted this navel-gazing bullshit is. Anyway, sorry. That's
well. In the where I thought you were going with is some of that, the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well.
Oh yeah, yes.
And she's he's saying, "Hey, where's your husband?" or whatever, and she's like, "Oh, well, I don't have one." She's like, "Yeah, and he's like, "Yeah, you're right. You're not the guy you're with right now. You're not married to," and all that. And for years, I heard when she says, well, where should we, because he says, well, I've heard that the Messiah is going to come. And he says, well, I am he who you're talking about. And then she immediately asks him where they should worship. And pretty much all my life, I've heard that spun as the Samaritan woman was trying to change the subject because she just got busted for adultery or being married multiple times or whatever, but that she was being busted for that. And she was trying to change the subject to like trip Jesus up. And I don't see it that way at all. If someone just said that to you and basically revealed your innermost stuff about, obviously your personal life was just laid bare. She knows she's like in the presence of someone with something way beyond just a regular human capacity. So this is way. So what do you do in that moment? Like, what would we do right now if we ran into somebody on the street that immediately knew all our dirt, everything about us, and realize, oh crap, I'm speaking literally to the Son of God, which is the realization she has when he says, I am he. And the first thing she asks is the most pressing question of the day. I don't see it as a dodge or changing the subject at all. She jumps straight to the heart of the matter, which is, where are we supposed to worship? Your people say we need to be in Jerusalem. We believe it's over here. What gives? What should we do? And he says, yes, right now this is blah, 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 but there's going to come a time when none of that's going to matter. All these barriers are about to come down. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a really important part there. And then, of course, she runs back to the town, is like, whoa. But it always bothered me that people tried to say that she was like changing the subject or something like that. It's like, no, she just realized, holy crap, I'm like, if you were in that moment, what is the major theological question you could ask and get an answer? And that's what she does.
Probably something that she had been pondering, or
yes,
something that she had concerned herself with. Like, how do I get right with God? Where do I worship? Like, what?
So to me, that's one of those moments. And again, that's where that shows that whole temple structure, the end of the age, is about to come down. That is about to be over, and as defined by the destruction of the temple and all that. And to me, from a theological perspective, that is the 70 AD and the destruction of the temple. I really wish as a young man I had understood that better, because to me, so much stuff, when you look at all this and the 70 AD and Josephus and all that, it all makes a lot more sense. So, and there's one more thing I will say before we wrap up. There's an interesting thing that back when I was first starting to really dig into this, John Hagee had a book, In Defense of Israel. And if you look up the ad for that book, he denies Christ in the ad, which is hilarious for a ostensibly Christian preacher to say that Jesus did not come to be the Messiah. But his book, In Defense of Israel, is basically articulating that point that Jesus isn't actually the Messiah, capital M, until he comes back the second time to reign in Jerusalem. And it talks about this, and the anti-Semitic idea that the Jews killed Jesus when we know it was the Romans or whatever. And one of the things that I realized in really digging into that was, you think, okay, what differentiates the crucifixion from all the other martyrs and all the other people? There's been plenty of people tortured to death and lots of bloodshed on planet Earth that has happened. And what about it? Why is there such an effort to say the Jews didn't kill Jesus? Why is that even a thing? Because I'm part Osage Indian. If you told me some war crimes or something horrible that the Osage tribe was doing in the 1800s, I'd be like, well, that sucks. That's not me. I didn't do it. And I would never try to defend that. And or on the Christian side, if somebody said, well, these Christians did X, Y, and Z, I'd be like, yeah, and that's messed up and that's wrong. What else? I'm not going to defend those things. So it's like, okay, so why is there an effort to say that this was not a thing, that the Pharisees did not orchestrate, conspire to crucify Christ? Why is that such a thing? And why has there been such an effort to knock the legs out from under that? And it occurred to me, especially once I understood the whole destruction of the temple thing and all that it had to be, the high priest had to do it, had to order it. And the reason he did is that was the last official act of Mosaic law, was for the high priest to literally, just like a sacrifice in the temple, he substitutes Barabbas, an obviously guilty man, a murderer, he substitutes Barabbas for Jesus. They knowingly take a guilty man out and put an innocent man in, and thereby creating a human sacrifice that broke the curse of sin. And if you take that out, if you take the high priest out of that equation, then he's just another dude that died at the hands of the Romans. But if you put that aspect, elevates that to, again, the last official act of Mosaic law.
And the last sacrifice.
Yeah, last sacrifice. The temple curtain is torn. It's finished. Anyway, but I think that's an important thing to think about when you think about, okay, why is there such an effort to take the teeth out of it, say that this wasn't a Jewish thing, or that this was not the Pharisees conspiring to kill Christ? Why is that even a thing? Why are we even talking about that 2,000 years later? And the reason we're talking about it is because the full spiritual import comes with the high priest ordering that action.
Very cool.
So anyway, on that light note,
Yeah, let's wrap it. We didn't ever really talk about your channel getting struck, did we?
no, I guess we could talk about that really quick if you got.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, it's kind of funny to me, the channel warnings were strikes or whatever. And apparently just for the uninitiated, the warnings are leading up to strikes, and you can take the re-education camp route and get the warnings taken away, but eventually they lead to a strike. And it's kind of a fascinating barometer for your content about what things set that off, because my first warning came with reviewing I can't say the name of the book. It was written by Tracy, and her last name is actually I guess you could
Yeah, I'll just bleep it out or whatever. Yeah.
Just saying her name on the interweb, you could show a picture of the book and be just fine. But saying her name can get you in trouble and get your video taken down. And it was, I forget what the excuse was, but that was the first video I had taken down. And that was one of those kind of data points which you're like, oh, wow, that's something you're not supposed to talk about. Because again, it ties into all the post offense stuff. But that book is really not that great of a book. I mean, it's a decent book about mind control programs and things, but it's a very shallow overview of it. But it's more about the author and her connections. But that was what got me my that first time I got in trouble. And
what was that warning? What did they say the warning was for?
I think that time around they said it was a copyright violation, which was weird because, it is a fair use. That was very much under fair use. I wasn't like reading out of the book page by page or anything like that. I just was describing the contents of the book and doing a review. And it wasn't until I really got to thinking about it that I realized it was because I discussed the author, and there's some very strange circumstances surrounding her passing. Okay. And I didn't even really get into that. I just brought attention to it. Now, my second one was a few months later for post offense book. And again, that book, I didn't think it was anything. You can still buy that book on Amazon. That time around, I got in trouble. They said I was promoting or inciting violence, which I found that especially funny given that I've reviewed the Bill Menery series, How to Kill, which is literal handbook on physical violence. And it's like, okay, that one actually is telling you literally how to unalive people. But reviewing this book about post offense, this is somehow inciting people to violence. So that was the second time. And then most recently, the first one was the secret relationship between the blacks and the Jews, which I think everybody, when they see that title, thinks it's a totally different direction, thinks it's some kind of other racial tirade against blacks and Jews, and it is not. It's actually about who owns the slave trade, and it was put out by the Nation of Islam. And that one was for inciting violence or inciting hatred against a protected group.
But it didn't tell you which group you were allegedly.
No, just a protected group. It was a protected group that
Okay, sure.
And which is really funny because when you read the comments, it's obvious that the African part of my audience has zero problem. I have yet to encounter a single African American that has any issue with what I've said or talked about in that. So that was that one. And then the most recent one, just the other day, that's still a fresh wound that I'm going to have to go to re-education camp for again, is, and I think this is another one about inciting hatred or against a protected group or something some kind of wording like that. And that one was for the might is right. And that one really blows my mind because I'm not talking about Judaism at all in that. I think I make a few references to some of the similarities about, social Darwinism and some of the overtones there. But my whole position is the might is right. The whole idea of social Darwinism, the whole idea of a class system of the rich are supposed to be rich and the poor are supposed to be poor. I can't stand that. In fact, my whole review was dismantling that kind of thinking. And that one is up on the other channel. So if you want to put I had my little sign, I thought somewhere.
I'll get the information from you, and I'll put up a little. It's on. I got you.
But that is on that other platform if you want to see that in its entirety. Because again, if you watch that, you'll be like, there is no. Unless you are a psychopath, there's nothing to take offense in that video. Like, unless you are a predator, a human predator, you should have zero problems with that video. And that ultimately is the silver lining in all this is that's how we know we're over the target. Is, all the things I've covered on this channel, there's only a few that really start setting people off, and it's those topics. It's like talking about Bigfoot or flat Earth or moon landing. You can do that stuff all day long. But when you start talking about those certain topics, those specific predatory ideologies, that's where the wolves come out.
I wonder, because, and this is a total, well, not a total aside, but like I sit here and the number of people that I've talked to that have had strikes or warnings or things like that look at even just the thumbnails, and we talked about this earlier, but like even just the thumbnails on my channel that I'm like, I have no idea why this is acceptable. I have no concept. I think maybe because it's comedy oriented, like maybe because I'm spoofing a little bit and I'm using exaggerated facial features, but even still, like, it's bizarre to me. It makes me think that, I don't know. The fact that it is so arbitrarily enforced, I think is kind of, it's a feature, not a bug, like they just decide at some point that you are verboten and that they're going to find fault with everything you put out now.
Mr. Quigley, who is they?
I don't know.
They?
That's
that's an anti-Semitic trope right there.
That is it. If I say they,
yeah.
Well, our benevolent tech overlords, and all hail and all power to them. No, but I want to make sure that people, and I'm going to do like an intro to this once we figure out where we want to point people to as far as you're concerned. I think that you should get out of the YouTube ecosystem and take as many people with you as you possibly can. I would think and this is just me, I think you should point them to either another YouTube channel or to that other website. But it's truly unfortunate. And maybe we can close with this, but I feel like this is one of the most open, honest, and non-hateful conversations that I've had about this particular subject. I'm inundated every day with people in my comments that are chastising me for not being actually anti-Semitic, not being actually hateful. Makes up a huge portion of my audience that are just disappointed with me for not being racist and not being hateful. And it's so disappointing that this conversation, the tenor of this conversation is the thing that will actually get anybody into trouble, is so unfortunate.
It is, because and I think you and I would definitely agree on this, that I would gladly have someone in this discussion now to talk about this and explain it to us. I would welcome that. We are by no means trying to exclude and say, it's us versus them. It's like, you hop on in here and explain yourself. I'm game. I'm not afraid of different ideas, but you got to explain it. You can't obfuscate and
dance around it.
And gaslight me and tell me I didn't just read what I read.
Yeah. Yep. That would be great. I look forward to that. That'll be, I'm really looking forward to that day. I'm sure it'll happen any minute now. And in the meantime, we'll just keep muddling along like the goy chattel that we are.
Well,
anyway,
now on as an heir, according to the promise, technically I'm an Israelite. So I don't know who kind of thing you got going on there, but I myself am I'm one of the chosen people. So
there you go.
Now, on a lighter note, I saw that you have a feline companion, and I think I see a cat bed behind you.
I do, yes.
Okay.
Her name is Mamba. She she usually hangs out with me, but she was feeling antsy today, so I knew I was going to be in here for a while. But yeah, we have three. We have Mamba, Malachi, and Montague. A very deliberate naming convention. But no, it's funny because like Mamba has been with me for about 12 years now. She's
wow.
she's the only woman that'll put up with me, is what I like to say. And then one of my roommates has had a cat named Malachi for years and years and years. And then when the three of us all started living together, we got a third cat, and we deliberately named him Montague just to keep up with the naming convention. But yeah, I am a cat lover, and I appreciate all of the cats in your videos as well.
Yes, I have Owen the cat, which I almost grabbed Owen the cat at the beginning of this video just so Owen could be represented here. But yes, we have.
You've got to exploit them for
cats, so.
the internet is all about it. Yeah, yeah.
They
got to pay the rent somehow.
Yeah, he's and cats to me are kind of the original plug and play electronics. It's like I don't get me wrong. We have a nervous little dog here. My mother-in-law has a little Yorkie that occasionally will run through. But cats are like the perfect like plug and play. Like, you remember the old days when you'd get a mouse or something and you'd have to like install software to run it. It's like, that's like a dog. Like a cat is like the new, like you put it in and you briefly see like this thing like updating, and then immediately now this thing just works. It's like you take the cat and you put it in the litter box and it's like, okay, that's where I poop, and there's your food bowl, and magic happens. They just do their thing. It's like, that's how I like my animals.
I've always heard it explained. It's the difference between a toddler and a teenager. Like, as far as the amount of care and like, and also the teenagers being moody and like, I just happen to be right here I don't want to be around you. I just like being here. So it's fine. Anyway,
I hate you, but I will gladly eat all of your food. Yeah. Well,
all right.
It's been great. And man, it's good to meet you, and good talking to you on all this stuff. And, hopefully we can do it again, because again, there's a lot. If in the future you want to drill down on some specific things, because I'd actually gotten out also the Sulchan Uruk, or whatever, however you pronounce that. I got that out here as well. And this is the Mishnah Torah by Maimonides. I think I'm saying his name right.
Okay.
By Rambam. That's a good one to get your hands on. This is easy to get on the Amazon.
Well, no, we're definitely going to talk again. I think that right now my plan is to put out this interview as kind of a standalone thing, but I'm fixated on not just the Talmud, but just kind of the more esoteric and less understood aspects of Judaic ideology, let's say. I really want to dive into like the Kabbalah and like the more spooky mystical stuff too, but we'll cover that another time. Mitch, really appreciate it, brother. Thank you for taking so much time out of your day. This was excellent.
Yeah, you as well. And let's do it again.
All right.